Hello, everyone. Welcome to Firestorm podcast. I'm Peter from Firestorm Training and Diet, and we are starting off with our own podcast, and we'd like to bring some guests that can share a bit of a philosophy on things that we truly believe in, as in a plant-based diet, straight edge lifestyle. It may not apply to everyone. But things like music, hardcore music, especially mindset and stuff like that. So we are starting off our very first episode with Scott Shetler, and I just wanted to give Scott a quick of an intro. So Scott is a guy which I started following through the one and only Mr. Mike Muller. So shout out to Mike Muller. Hopefully we're going to speak to you maybe in the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Scott, I'll be honest with you. I think very first time I heard a conversation with you was on the LLA podcast, but it must have been like years ago. Honestly, I can't remember it. Absolutely years ago, because obviously you came on later on a few times. Obviously, you did a conversation with Mike on his YouTube channel as well.
Yeah. I think I first did the LLA podcast in like 2013 or 2014. And then I think I've been on there maybe 4 or 5 times, since then. And then, Mike started doing his YouTube. I was on there a couple of times. So him and Sincere are just really, really good dudes, man. It was always a good time talking to them.
Yeah, like I said, I must have probably, because I can't remember when I started following the LLA, but obviously it was like really early days when they were bringing more guests and things like that. So, and I remember that vividly, that at that time, Mike was doing even a kettlebell training, but he did mention that that time that he's transitioning out, and he brought your name, saying that if I need to recommend someone in terms of designing a course and things like that, I always recommend Scott Shetler. So I think he was more focused on developing his supplementation business.
Yeah, he was getting out of the training and consulting, as far as like fitness and nutrition and stuff like that goes. And I can't thank him enough, man. He's always recommended people to me, and it's really kind of him, man. I've always appreciated it, and it's always nice to hook up with him whenever I get out to Vegas. We always try to grab lunch and catch up. He's a really solid guy, and definitely recommend following his work, and his supplements are top notch.
Listen, absolutely. I mean, in terms of Mike, what I could say, and I wouldn't be in this place if it weren't for Mike. He must have been the biggest inspiration on where I am now. I'll be honest with you. And we're talking obviously, like years ago, I was in a different place and I didn't fully grasp what he was saying, and because he was like saying stuff that, if you have to quit your job, just quit and things like that. And I remember, by that time, I've got 2 kids, and I had mortgage and things like that. And I was thinking, what this guy is talking about, and I think Mike has got kids, so I was trying to justify that, thinking that, why does he, he doesn't have kids? Why he can't say stuff like that? He doesn't say. But I mean, it must have years must have passed since I finally understood what he was really talking about, and it's the mindset. I think that's what it is. So yeah, credit to Mike. We thank you very much. Me personally and Scott is thanking you for bringing the business. So that's how he makes his money, of your Mike. So hopefully, Scott can chip some money towards you after we've done, hopefully. Scott, listen, you are, correct me if I'm not, but you are based in, is it Atlanta, Georgia, yeah? Yeah. So Atlanta, is that 1996 Summer Olympics, correct?
Yeah, it was the Olympics in '96. I wasn't down here then. I was still living in Ohio, but I moved down here in '99.
Oh, 99. Okay, so you're from Ohio, yeah? How far is it?
Born and raised in Ohio, yeah.
No. How far is Ohio from Atlanta? Because from us Europeans, it's kind of difficult sometimes to grasp. I believe.
Yeah.
Atlanta is down south, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Ohio is it's considered the Midwest, but it's actually it borders Lake Erie, which is the border, the natural border between the U.S. and Canada. And Ohio, I was from the very northeast corner, right up on the lake. It's very close to Erie, Pennsylvania, and Buffalo, New York. And it's 5 hours from my town, just to the southern tip of Ohio in Cincinnati. So Ohio is a very long state, but to get to my hometown from Atlanta, it takes me about 11 to 11 and a half hours to drive. So it's pretty far away. It's probably in the ballpark of about 700 miles, give or take.
Well, I mean, in terms of like distances like that, because because what I tend to do with my family, we sometimes like once a year we tend to drive over from the UK to Poland for holidays, and it's usually we're talking about, I think, one way from the UK to Poland, it's about 1,000 miles, and that is taking us the amount of hours. So when you're saying that about the distances, I know what you say, but for some people, obviously, I am. The thing is that I'd like to come to the US maybe one time, and just I'm absolutely, I don't know how to describe it. I'm just it's different. If you've never been to the US and you're thinking about the US, it's something about grasping. I know it's probably different for people who live here. It's like similar, you're probably thinking maybe what's it like in Europe and what's it like in the States. But have you ever been to Europe?
Yeah, I was actually I was in the Navy when I got out of high school, and I've been to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Sicily, Crete, Greece, and I spent a lot of time in Scotland. So those are all the areas that I went to. And I was only in the Navy for 2 years active, and then I had 6 years of an inactive reserve commitment. But those first 2 years, those are all the places that I went.
Oh wow! Wow! Yeah, like I said, I've watched like interviews with you and your podcast, and you've never mentioned that, so that's a bit of a surprise. So
I think I usually mention that I was a Navy veteran or something like that, but yeah. So I spent because I was stationed in New Jersey, and my ship worked that whole area, the Mediterranean, and then we did a lot of work in Scotland.
all right. So did you like for example in Scotland, were you here for like a certain amount of time, or was just docking in and things like that?
Yeah, no. We when we were in Scotland, it was usually for a little bit of time, like usually a week or two at a stretch. And so the role that we had, my ship was a supply ship. We were classified an ammunition ship, so we would transport ammunition to different bases, installations. I think when we were in Scotland, we were working with the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines, if I'm not mistaken. We just unloaded ammunition is basically what it was. So we were a supply and logistics ship. And when we were over there, we always had a lot of work to do. So we were always in port for a little bit of time. I can tell you I can't really conceptualize the geography of Scotland, but I can tell you the closest town that we were near was Helensburgh. And I know we were about a 30-minute bus ride from, or a train ride to Glasgow. And I know we were about a 2 hour to 2.5 hour drive to Edinburgh. And those were all the places that I visited. Because typically, like where my ship was, we were in this tiny little, small pier. It was just us. And there were just hills on either side. There wasn't a lot around. I remember it was a lock that we had to sail up. It took a while to get up because it was very shallow. And I know that Helensburgh was the closest town to us because that's where whenever we would get off work, we had some vehicles that we would bring over with us and we would drive them into town. And that was the closest place. That's where all the bars and the restaurants and things like that were. So that's where we would go and kind of party. And then we would take trips. We would go down to Glasgow. We would go. We took a trip out to Edinburgh the one time, and it was cool. I love Scotland. It was beautiful. Oh, wow. I really enjoyed it. Actually, it was funny because this one girl that I met when I was over there, she and I were talking, and I said, "Wow, your English is like perfect for She spoke very American English, And I said, "You don't sound anything like these Scots." And she said, "Well, my dad was American Navy, and he retired here, and then he stayed here. He met his wife when he was in Scotland. He ended up relocating there. So this girl was a local, but she sounded like she was from New York or something,
Oh wow, that's I mean, to be honest with you, because obviously English is it's not my native language, And but in terms of like, I used to, I've worked with maybe a few Scots. And it could be sometimes difficult to understand them. But the funny thing is that, the funny thing is that even the English people, they do, make a joke that sometimes for them to understand Scottish people it could be difficult as well. So yeah,
I'll tell you, like when we would hang out with the locals, we'd go out drinking with them and stuff. And when I talked to them, I could understand them, but when they would talk amongst themselves, it was like they were speaking a different language at times.
Yeah,
but they were cool people, really, really fun people.
Yeah, I mean, the Scots, they're pretty open, to be honest with you. That's what I experienced anyway. But have you experienced the Scottish weather, raining and things like that?
Yeah, because I'm trying to think when we were over there, it was usually like November to December, and then I think we were there like maybe sometime around February or March. So I mean, it was pretty damp. It was rainy, but it wasn't like super cold. I mean, it was cold, but it wasn't ridiculous. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the cold much anymore, but it was tolerable, and after a few pints of Tennent's Lager, it was very tolerable. So
yeah, that's what it is. Alcohol brings everyone together. And yeah, I have to admit, it's been in my life as well that sometimes, even people find themselves that, they cannot communicate in the same language. When it comes to alcohol, they can, for some reason, they manage to speak to each other. So, well, listen, if the
universal language,
to everyone out there who are still, because I'm not drinking, but who's drinking, if you do it, wisely, fair play, it's. Sure. I think in terms of alcohol, it's down to each individual person. If you want to drink, but just. Yeah, up to you, but make it responsibly.
The older I'm 47 now, and the older I've gotten, the more I can do without it, honestly. So,
well, listen, you say you're 47, but actually, because when I asked, Bart, have you got any questions for Scott? And he said to me, listen, ask Scott why he looks so young, like he's in his 20s. And
I shaved my head, and you can't see the gray hair. Yeah, it man. When I get out of the shower and I see my chest hair every day, I'm like, oh, I'm looking like somebody's dad, man. This is getting really bad. I got to keep bald so nobody sees the gray.
Listen, I mean, listen, if 47, credit to you, I mean, you don't look that age. I'll be honest with you, pal.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
I
appreciate it. Well, I think honestly, a lot of it too has to do with just living a healthy lifestyle, eating plant-based.
Absolutely,
working out, training. Like I said, it's, I don't drink. I don't, I mean, a beer every now and then or something like that, I'm not opposed to, but I just, focus mostly on healthier foods and exercise, working out, and just, my lifestyle's pretty simple. I just pretty much spend all my time, at work, at the gym. So my life revolves around what I do. And I think that probably has a lot to do with it, because I know there's areas that I could improve a lot, probably a little too much junk food. I probably don't sleep as much as I should, but, all in all, it's a pretty good lifestyle, man. And, not hating being 47, man. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. So
listen, and I cannot agree with you more, because I turned 40 last year, and
welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly. I always tell to my friends that even like some other people, I say that I've got 4 in front, but they always say to me, "You don't look 40." I said, "Well, I always credit, and I think I always credit the lifestyle, the diet, and things like that, and training." And so obviously we've already touched upon training. So obviously let's start with chatting about training. So
sure.
I mean, because I've, like I said, I follow you for many years, and you are you are a strength and conditioning trainer. And how many? So obviously you run your own gym. So is it solely yourself, or have you got other trainers working for you as well?
Yeah, no, it's just me. So the facility that I'm in, it's actually it's a partnership now. My good friend, who's also now my jiu-jitsu coach, this guy Chris Jones, he owns Nucleus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're facility partners. So we're basically in like a It's kind of like a mixed use, like industrial office type business park in the on the north side of Atlanta. We've been partnered up for going on something like 4 years now, I think. Somewhere around 4.5 years, I think. He started. So long story short, he was training with me when he was getting competitive in jiu-jitsu back in 2012 after he had just gotten his blue belt and he wanted to start competing. And I had worked with somebody from his academy where he was training jiu-jitsu. So he'd reached out to me and I started training him, and just kind of through the years we stayed in touch. And then end of 2016, he came back. He was a brown belt at this point in time, and he was just decimating people in competition. So he came back, he started training with me again, and that kind of brought a big influx of people from his school to come start training with me. And the facility that I was in at the time, I was subleasing from this guy who had about a 450 square foot room that he wasn't really using. And Chris was talking about starting to teach jujitsu, and I said, you ought to make a deal on that room, and start training out of there. So we got some mats, and he opened up his academy, and then he and I left that facility together and found our own place. We were there for about 3 years and like 3 months, or 3 years and a month, or something like that. And it was 3.5 years because we had to do an extension because we moved into a bigger facility in the business park that we're in. So we're in about a 3,500 square foot unit. Half of it's jujitsu, half of it is strength and conditioning. He and I are 50-50 business partners in the deal. He handles all the jujitsu stuff. I handle all the strength training stuff. And then I do have kind of talking to a couple of people. There's an athletic trainer that I'm talking to who may start doing some appointments. And then Chris met this girl who trains jiu-jitsu who also does yoga. And I think she's a personal trainer. And I think he's been trying to talk to her to see if she'd be interested in possibly teaching some yoga classes and maybe doing some personal training too. So right now it's just him and I, but I am trying to get a couple of independent contractors in there to do some training as well. So.
All right. So obviously when you post on Instagram your BJJ workout, so literally it's obviously in your gym. It's just obviously the facility and things like that. It's
literally, yeah. I mean, there's no barrier between the mats and the strength training area. It's really cool, man. I mean, it's we've got about 1,200 square feet of each, and it's all one big open, like a finished warehouse type facility. We have an office that Chris and I share. We have a separate room that is kind of a locker room, changing room. We've got a male and a female bathroom, and then we have a shower room. Other than that, and we got a little reception area up front, but other than that, it's all just big, open, high ceiling. It's really nice layout. Yeah, Chris really is the one who designed the layout and kind of spearheaded the build out and stuff. So all credit to him for taking care of that. And we've got a beautiful layout. And like I said, you literally can walk off the mat, you step off the mats, and you're in the strength training area. So it's really cool, man. I mean, I literally get done rolling, go to the office, change, and I can walk into the gym and start lifting, or go for a run or start training clients. So it's awesome to have it right there.
So in terms of people coming through the door, so obviously you've got people doing BJJ, you've got people doing strength conditioning. Do you tend to see an overlap that people who are coming to do BJJ, they with Chris, they'll do strength session with you and vice versa? Or have you
Absolutely.
got people like, listen, Scott, I'm just coming in because I want to do deadlifts and stuff like that. And have you got people like that both as well? Right.
It's both. Definitely partnering up with Chris. There have been some people that have started training with me via, coming in doing jiu-jitsu initially. And then there's been people who have been training with me who have signed up and started doing jiu-jitsu. And then, there's some people that just come. Honestly, most of the jiu-jitsu students just come in to do jiu-jitsu. Most of the people that come in to do personal training and strength training just come in to do that. But there's definitely some overlap there. And because of, if you know anything about martial arts, there's a lot of kind of branches of kind of families, other academies and stuff in the area. So for instance, Chris's teacher, he's got Chris as a student, and then this other guy, Justin, who both opened their own jiu-jitsu facilities. So there's Chris's teachers is Paul Creighton. So it's Creighton MMA is the kind of the parent, facility. He's actually a student of Renzo Gracie. And then two of his students, Chris and one of Chris's training partners, this guy, Justin, they opened their own facilities in the Atlanta area. So down here in the Atlanta area, there's two facilities that are kind of associated with Creighton MMA. So we're all kind of like family. So we get a lot of people that will cross train, so we'll regularly have people that come train with us from Creighton's. We'll have people that come from Helix Jiu-Jitsu. And then there's other jiu-jitsu academies that are kind of outside of our network who will cross train. There's a lot of cross training, at least in the Atlanta area, for jiu-jitsu. So we get a lot of different people that come through the doors. So it's really cool, man. I mean, it's a big community, but it's kind of small at the same time. Everybody knows each other, and there's a lot of cross training, and it's always nice to get to train with different people and learn some different things, and just get some variation and diversity in your training.
I think for some reason, I think jiu-jitsu is very popular amongst hardcore scene, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, loads of obviously the straight from the top of my head, I can think obviously Harley Flanagan, Billy from Bio, I think Roger Miret from Agnostic Front. He's they doing jiu-jitsu. Obviously Harley is pretty much famous because obviously I think he trained under one of the Gracies.
Yeah, Harley's at the Henzo Gracie Academy in New York, which is where Chris's teacher Paul got his black belt from, Henzo Gracie in New York. So that Billy from Biohazard trains there as well. Roger is out in Arizona. I believe Roger's wife is affiliated with Henry Gracie School, and she just opened her own academy out there, I believe, based on what Roger has posted.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I mean, there's definitely a lot of hardcore. The band Five Finger Death Punch was just on tour with Megadeth, and the singer for Five Finger Death Punch is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Dave Mustaine
didn't know that.
from Megadeth Dave Mustaine just got his brown belt, and I think Kiko is a white belt. So they all train. And what was funny was I didn't go to the concert, but my buddy Andy, who is he's a black belt up at Paul Creighton's, he's a professional race car driver. And I noticed on Instagram the day after the show, he was posting these videos of being backstage at Five Finger Death Punch. So I just jokingly sent him a text and said, "Hey, did you get to roll with Dave Mustaine?" And he goes, "No, I rolled with his coach, and I rolled with Zoltan from Five Finger." It turns out he's really good friends with the singer from Five Finger. Zoltan brings mats with him on the road, and two other guys that I know from the jiu-jitsu community from a school that's out in Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour from us. They were there as well. So they had this amazing training session backstage before the show. They're rolling with the singer from Five Finger Death Punch, like their head of security. And I think Dave Mustaine's jiu-jitsu coach was there too. So it was actually really cool, man. But it's like, it's to your point, there's a lot of people in the music scene, whether it's hardcore, whether it's punk, whether it's heavy metal or hard rock or whatever you want to call Five Finger. I mean, there's a lot of people that train, and it's actually, it's really cool, man, because it's it's much better than the party scene and the drinking and the drugs that music was so known for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I just wanted to say something about that. Usually, like I said, in the when you're reading about it, like in the old, like we're talking about like 80s and 90s, and I remember when I was obviously I was growing up like in the 90s and things like that, and when you're hearing like stories that everyone was just drinking, doing drugs and things like that, but I think obviously that's I think that's still the case, but I think more and more people, and especially like saying like Dave Mustaine, he's probably like in his he's an older dude now, isn't he? So I think people are paying more attention now, and I think I don't know if you ever watched that, but there is I think I can't remember, was a Vice. They did a documentary on John Joseph when he was training for Iron Man, and he was like when I think it was like a scene when they're playing a gig somewhere in Philadelphia, some festival, and obviously he's coming in with his balls, he's stretching bands and stuff like that, and he's doing like warm-ups and things like that. So, and I think and John Joseph, he was always saying that he's doing Iron Man to be in shape for the music, for the gigs what he does, and I think it's a shift into when, like I said, it's probably still the case for younger bands that all right, we're gonna play we're gonna get wasted and things like that, but the older guys, they tend to more thinking about the health and the implication that this lifestyle can carry.
And I think they inspire some of the younger guys to take their health more seriously, So I don't think, I mean, there's always going to be the drug and the party scene and all that stuff around music. I mean, they go kind of hand in hand. But, because of things like the straight edge movement, because of all these older guys who are taking their health more seriously, because people getting in training, martial arts and stuff like that, these younger guys, that are coming up, looking at them for inspiration, I think it definitely affects the choices that they make, and they see some of their favorite musicians that are really into eating healthy, they're into training, they're into doing martial arts or whatever, and I'd be willing to bet that it's having a pretty positive influence on the
Yeah, no
younger
doubt.
crowd.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt.
I mean, well, think about Henry Rollins, man. I mean, he was always such a he was always such a he was always in shape. Never. I think by his own admission, he tried drinking, didn't like it. Tried drugs a couple times, didn't like it. But he always gravitated toward lifting weights. There's that whole story about his high school teacher that taught him how to lift, and he went and he bought the Sears weight set and he started training, and he built some muscle. But then he ended up becoming friends with Ed Cohn, who was Ed's, arguably the
greatest power lifter.
Yeah. And in one of Henry's books, he talks about how I think he saw a picture of Ed like squatting or deadlifting when he was on the MTV studio set, like doing something for MTV Sports. And he's like, wow, that's a lot of weight that guy's moving, So he had when he was in Chicago, which is where Ed lives, he had his promoter reach out to Ed, and said, hey, here's some tickets to the show, and he sent him like some of his CDs and stuff. And Ed went to the show, and they became friends. And I actually got to meet Ed at the Arnold Classic back in 2019 for the first time. And I got to talk to him for a couple minutes, but I did ask him about, knowing Henry. And when I met Henry after a couple gigs, I asked him about Ed, and they both had great things to say about each other, man. So it was really cool. But Henry was always such a, he was jacked, man. He was in shape. He was ripped. He was always lifting weights. And even now that he's older and in his 60s, he still takes his fitness seriously. I think he does a little bit more cardio and calisthenic, based training. But, obviously the training is very important to him. And I think that that speaks well to the younger generations, when they see these people that they idolize growing up doing, living that kind of lifestyle. I think it's definitely going to have a positive impact on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Henry Rollins, he's got this I can't remember, was on YouTube that he was talking about the iron, that the iron will teach you this and that. Yeah. And absolutely.
That was an article. He wrote that article for Details magazine, actually, back in like 93 or something. And there's he did a podcast episode of his Henry and Heidi podcast where they talked about that. He talked because his teacher, Mr. Pepperman, was the guy that taught him how to lift weights and all that stuff. And they dedicated an entire podcast to his relationship with Mr. Pepperman and learning how to lift weights and stuff like that. And then that essay, The Iron, that he wrote. And I think he even said that Steven Tyler from Aerosmith had requested he printed copies of it and he gave it to everybody on tour or at this facility that they were staying at or something like that. And he had heard about it, around about that Steven Tyler was a big fan of that article. So that article had impacted a lot of people, man.
Spreading the propaganda, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
In a good organic way. Listen, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I think we're gonna have a bit of a chat about the music maybe a bit later on. But let's talk about training first, because obviously, just Scott. So, how many years has it been now when you've worked as a trainer? How many years has it been?
Let's see, man. So May of next year will be 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I started in May of 1998, I guess, professionally in Ohio. That was when I got my first job with the YMCA. And then I started doing some personal training on the side, just trying to figure it out back then, because there was no like real, the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is nowadays where you can just tap your phone and get information and stuff like that. So, I had to learn a lot through reading magazines and just talking with people in the gyms and people that I would meet. And I mean where I lived in Ohio, it wasn't a big there wasn't a lot of people doing that kind of stuff, so it was kind of slow going at first, but it was May of 1998 is when I started. So yeah, it'll be 25 years in May of next year.
Wow. It was like did you feel like was there anything specific that actually, drew your attention to it? Or did you find yourself that, I don't know, maybe like I was maybe, I don't know, an obese or underweight kid that wanted to work
Yeah.
out and things like that? What was your story in terms of that?
Yeah, man. So I was like the skinny kid, growing
Mm.
up. I was always into I played some team sports for a while. I was actually pretty good in baseball. I was a pretty good baseball pitcher. But when I was young, I definitely I gravitated more toward BMX, like freestyle BMX and skateboarding. And here's what was funny was I was really good at freestyle BMX, like vert riding, but I loved skateboarding and I just sucked at skateboarding, man. But it was like I wanted to skate, but BMX came more it came more natural to me. And I guess too because I lived in a very rural part of Ohio, so I lived actually like on a dirt road. So unless we could get like my neighbor ended up building a half pipe, and he had a paved driveway, so we had like some rails that we built and some launch ramps. But for the most part, skating was kind of hard to come by. You'd have to go someplace where you could go skate, like a bank or a local parking lot or something, or some people that were starting to build ramps and stuff like that. BMX was a lot more accessible because we had like dirt trails. You can make dirt jumps, and then when we started building quarter pipes and vert ramps and things like that, I just I just I kind of gravitated toward that because I picked up on it a lot easier. But man, I just loved skateboarding. I had it in my mind like I wanted to surf so bad. And being in Ohio, it's like it was skateboarding and then snowboarding in the winter. It was pretty much all you could do. So I still got skateboards to this day, man. I've got some. I've got a Carver. I got a longboard drop deck. I've got one of the small popsicle stick decks. So I'm not. Yeah, I still really like skateboarding to this day. But I was awful at it. I got really good at freestyle BMX, and that just naturally because you're in that extreme sport. It wasn't called extreme sports back then. It was way before the X Games, but those type of sports always had a connection with music. And I grew up
Mm.
playing drums. Like I was in school band starting it at 5. I started playing drums. I loved, when I learned of thrash metal and speed metal, like a lot of people would say like, well, Lars Ulrich is a horrible drummer. So even though I liked Metallica, I didn't really look to Lars for drumming inspiration. But it was actually more Charlie Benante from Anthrax, man. I just
All
idolized
right.
Charlie. Such a good drummer, man. And I just really got into like Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, a lot of Testament. And they're, those bands, particularly bands like Slayer and Anthrax, had a real big punk influence early on.
Mm.
You'd always see like, Jeff Hanneman's guitar, he always had the Dead Kennedys, sticker on it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So yeah, and Anthrax, I mean, geez, so many of their songs, you could definitely see the punk influence and stuff. So that actually caused me to go back and start getting into punk. So because of this love for skateboarding and freestyle BMX, that's what really, and because I was a drummer and I always liked more extreme music, that's what really got me into that. So I was the skinny, just a skinny kid. I was just burning calories all day, man. I was like my sophomore year of high school, I was like 130 pounds, man. I was skinny. I was 5'10". I had no muscle on my body. And it really stemmed out of wanting to put on some muscle and not be skinny. I remember like in 10th grade, my girlfriend at the time, we were getting toward the end of the school year, and I was standing leaning against the wall and my feet were together, and she was cupping her mouth like this and just kind of laughing with one of her friends and pointing at me. And when we were walking down the hall after lunch, I was like, what was that all about? She goes, Erica and I noticed that when you stand with your feet together, and your knees together, your knees touch, but your thighs don't. It's just like you're really skinny. And I'm just like, oh, that kills. So I went home and I grabbed my Spider-Man comic books and I ordered like the Weeder weightlifting, training, like the
Mm.
bodybuilding, manuals and all that stuff. And that's really what started it, man, was I didn't want to be skinny anymore. I want to put muscle on. So for me back then, it was really about bodybuilding, because we had the Arnold movies, the
Yeah.
Stallone movies, the action
Yeah.
hero movies
Absolutely.
where they
Yeah.
were jacked, and bodybuilding was just kind of coming out of its kind of cult following. It was becoming a little bit more mainstream. I remember in '92 and '93 watching the Mr. Olympia on ESPN, and so I started buying all the muscle magazines, and that's what led me to getting a gym membership, going to the gym, starting to lift weights. And it was when I was in when I was in college after I gotten out of the Navy. I was working out at this gym and I was doing I don't know, did you ever know anything about like Bill Phillips and Muscle Media 2000 and the Body for Life program and all that stuff?
No, no,
So Bill
no.
Phillips was like he ran this great magazine back then called Muscle Media 2000. He was the first person to really bring um, into the spotlight the truth about bodybuilding, that they were all
Hmm.
on massive amounts of steroids, that the magazines just totally lied about how they trained. It was just, he really exposed the truth about bodybuilding, and it was a really cool magazine. He had some really great people that wrote for it, and he highlighted a lot of drug-free bodybuilders. In order to be under contract with
Oh,
him,
wow.
you had to be drug-free, and they were drug tested regularly. And because he wanted them to, he's the one that brought creatine to the market. He called it
Hmm.
phosphagen. That was the first creatine product. So he was actually a partner of Dr. Scott Connolly. He helped him develop Metrics, which was one of the first engineered foods,
Mm.
supplement wise. Then he
Yeah.
left Metrics and started EAS, Experimental and Applied Sciences. He brought creatine to the market. He was a marketing, he was brilliant at marketing. He's done some podcasts in the last like 6 or 7 years with like Mark Bell, the guys from Muscle Farm. He made the podcast circuit a while back, and he has his facility called Transformation out in Colorado. But I definitely recommend going back and listening to his interviews because he's a fascinating guy, and he really did a lot for this whole what you would consider like the before and after transformation. You see obviously the before and after transformation photos and all that stuff. He was the one that really started doing that. In fact, he held a contest via his magazine where he was going to give away one of his Lamborghini Diablos. That was going to be the grand prize for the person that won this, because he had all these fancy like Italian sports cars and stuff like that. And he was at a bodybuilding show one day and he said, there's like 20 guys on stage, but there's like 500 people in the audience. He said, I want to do a contest for these people, not for the 20 dudes on stage. I want to do it for the regular person who wants to get in shape. So it was, you submit your before and after photos, you write an essay, and it ended up becoming what later became his book, Body for Life. And he spawned a whole career off that. Kind of got out of the bodybuilding world and is more in the mainstream fitness, but definitely had a huge impact on the industry. This was back in like the early to mid 90s is when he was really, building the AS up and stuff. And that's what I kind of stumbled into. And I started taking, his creatine and buying his protein, and I started working out. And this gym that I was training at, people were coming up to me because I was making so much progress, always asking me what I was doing. They're like, man, we see you in here all the time. You're building muscle, you look totally different, man. What are you doing? And then I started just talking to people, man, and helping them and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, this would be really cool to do for a
Wow.
living. I had no idea there was a profession. I'm like, man, if I could do this would be pretty awesome. And then that's what, the owner of the gym had told me. He goes, man, you ought to look into personal training. And I said, what's that? He said, well, you get to work with people, in the gym, and so he told me about some certification organizations. I bought some materials. I started studying. I got my first certification. I got a job with the Akron YMCA, which Akron is a small city. It's a city south of Cleveland in Ohio. I worked there for about a year. Then I moved to Georgia, got a job at a fitness center down here. And then I started my business on the side. As I finished my college degree, I learned more about strength training, like athletes. I learned more about what
Mm.
strength coaches were. For a while, I thought I wanted to go be a strength coach for like a team, like at the collegiate or professional level. I spent a day with the Atlanta Falcons, which is the NFL team here in Atlanta, and I was like,
Hmm.
no, I don't want to do that. And it was actually it was my wife who said what you ought to do is work independently. And while I was working for this fitness center, I literally started like a powerlifting gym in my basement, and I put together a powerlifting team. I was really getting interested in competing in powerlifting. I started having athletes come over to the house and train. A lot of American football players. I got to say that because we might have a global audience and think I'm talking about soccer, the real football, but it
Football,
was
yeah.
American football, American
Yeah.
football. So I worked with them. Actually, did have some soccer players I trained,
Mm.
real football players. And I just started working with a variety of different athletes. And I started working with a lot of general fitness people, and that's really what my business evolved into. Was after I got so many people coming over to my house to train. My wife is like, you need to get out of the house. You need to
Mm.
open up your own facility. So I leased my first commercial facility. So I started training people in my basement in 2004. So I started in 98, and I would do like in-home training on the side to whatever gym job I had. I would also train people like independently, like, I'd go over to do some in-home personal training, train some people at a park. So I started doing independent, kind of contracting sort of personal training. And then once we bought our house and I had a basement, I wanted to start like kind of that hardcore basement gym. And that was, the birth in 2004 of my business, which is Extreme Performance Training Systems is the name of my brick and mortar training center. That was the start of it. Then in 2008, I got my first commercial facility. And then about every 3 years or so, I would, get a new lease somewhere. But I stayed in the Atlanta area, and it just grew and grew and grew from there. And so now I train, general fitness clientele and athletes from a wide variety of sports. I mean, if you name the sport, I've probably trained somebody in it. And I've trained people at, child, elementary school level, all the way up to middle school, high school, collegiate level, amateur, professional. And I've had some people even get, national and world titles in their given sports as well. So,
well, brilliant. Because I mean, in essence, what you're saying, it grew like organically. Obviously, you discovered this passion and you followed that through. And all of a sudden, you're finding yourself that, hey, I can make living of this, and why not training and things like that? Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely love it.
I got to say, I wasn't like a natural business person. I didn't know, I knew absolute.
But you don't have to be. I know.
To that point, it was really just like saying, I really like doing this. I'm just going to keep doing it. And I really kind of slow tracked it because I really didn't have a mentor. Nowadays, you can get so much information, back then, as I've seen what the industry's evolved into now, there's some things that I probably would have done a little bit differently. Early on, I would have focused more on semi-private training group. That wasn't a thing back then. It was all about one-on-one training. And honestly, one-on-one is now like 95% of my business. But when you talk to trainers nowadays, they're all doing like semi-private group training, this, that, and the other. But I have built such a niche of one-on-one training. It's like my clients like their individual time. I'm booked solid. It's like I'm very successful in that regard, but it's a completely different business model than what the majority of the trainers do nowadays.
I think you'll probably agree with that. That things have changed, and I mean, last few years have shown how much powerful the internet is. Because, like you were saying, like in when you were starting, it was more like one-to-one, and I'll be honest with you, I think one-to-one, it's more to do with the relationship. It's like in every business, because 100%. Usually businesses about the relationships. Obviously, you need to think about the other aspect, but it's very often it's about building relationships. And when you are working one-to-one, you actually are building this relationship, and you kind of get to know a person a bit better. And like I said, we are talking now. We kind of we can know. It's different when you're exchanging emails, but when you can sit down and you can see a person on the other side of in the screen, it's different. And one-to-one, it's bringing more the advantage. But I think nowadays, especially like you're saying with the online coaching, in terms of like running the business, you can scale up so easily because you can create a course and things like that. And you can market it on your website. And you can sell it to a mass audience and that will bring you a bit of a multiple stream revenues and things like that, which is different on one-to-one.
It's completely different, and it presents its own challenges, and it also shows where some people have really taken advantage of their position as they market themselves as online coaches, and they're not. What they are is they're programmers or they give programs, because coaching is different. And when you're coaching somebody online, and this is where it became hard for me, was because I would not just give people cookie cutter programs. I wanted to customize everybody's, because I did a lot of online for a while, and honestly it's fallen off right now because I'm so busy with my in-person training. I don't even have time to write. I've got about 3 book ideas that I've started that I really want to publish. I don't publish on my blog as much. I don't publish on social media as much. And it always makes me laugh, man, when I see these people who supposedly have these successful training businesses, and all they do is post pictures of themselves on Instagram all day, and it's like 4 times a day, and they're doing all this shit. I'm like, there's no way you're training people full time, because I don't have time to make like one post a day every day. I don't have time to do all the stuff that I want to do, because I am slammed. I'm just booked solid with training, and that's awesome. But going back to the online thing, it's hard to coach online, because what I found myself doing was asking for videos, and I'm writing video, technique critiques, and sending, feedback on all the primary lifts. We update the programs on a weekly basis based on, and even that, while I'm still I'm trying to provide as much of a one-on-one experience. It's not the same as coaching in real time. When I watch somebody do a set of 5 in the deadlift, I can adjust, say, oh, well, rep 1 wasn't good, do this on rep 2.
Absolutely.
Whereas when it's online, unless you're actually like zooming or Skyping with them or something like that, there's a delay there. What I found was what a lot of people were doing, and this is just such a shitty business practice. They were just writing like cookie cutter programs, or there was a powerlifting coach down here in the Southeast who was literally just using the Boris Shako app and running. That's like a $10 app, that if you're in a powerlifting, you know what the Shako program is. It's a very high volume powerlifting protocol that just has you squatting, benching, and deadlifting almost daily, like up to 3 to 4 times a week for each lift. And then there's some accessory work. But Shako created this app where you could punch in your numbers and it would give you the whole program. And he had different levels of the program. He had your off season, your peaking phase, if you're a high level lifter, all this coach was literally just taking people's numbers, having you test your squat, bench, and deadlift, running it in there, and then just giving you the Shako workout. So he, this $10 app, he was just turning around and spitting out these workouts for people. And they were basically, he was getting paid to be like a Shako affiliate coach, even though he wasn't a Shako coach. It was such bullshit, man. And he was making bank, man. Him and his fiance or wife or whatever. And like she was doing like this macros coaching, where you just put together people's macronutrient numbers. And because I know this, because there was this powerlifter I trained who actually signed up for her macros coaching. And this girl, she wouldn't even she'd look at the weekly diet log and be like, okay, don't change anything. And I mean, it's like, she's making like $200 a month to just spit out a formula at people. She wasn't even given a diet plan. It was just like, here's your protein, your carbs, your fat. This is what you're trying to shoot for calorically. Download the MyFitnessPal app and figure it out. And I'm like, man, that just seems so like I'd feel guilty about people taking people's money doing that. It's such a low quality of service that people are paying for, man. And I think it just it really saturated the online market. So, these really good coaches who were providing good services online, it diluted, the quality, because now they can't charge, what they're worth, and they're having to lower their rates to compete. I mean, it becomes an interesting, there's a lot of people that do it that probably shouldn't be doing it, and I always said, when people ask me, what should I look for in a coach? When you look at their social media, if it's all just posts, like selfie posts about themselves, like gym photos, if they don't have like a legitimate website, if it's just like DM me for details, on my coaching program. And if they never, ever, ever talk about their clients and the results they got for who they train, steer clear. They're just trying to build an online business. The best trainers and the best coaches are going to show you the people that they've worked with. They're going to have like a huge testimonials page on their website so you can see what they've done for other people, because it's not about you as the coach. It's about what you can do for other people, or what you can get those people to do through your coaching and training programs. So unfortunately, I think it's allowed. Well, it is really good. Like you said, it makes it, if you're a coach or a trainer, it can really expand your services. It's also allowed a lot of people who probably shouldn't be training people, who just, they like going to the gym, they're in shape, they got a 6-pack or they got a big ass, and they like to post their photos online all day, and then it just allows them to be a quote unquote coach now. So
I think what makes a good coach as well is the fact that a coach, like, when I listen to you, I can hear in your voice this passion that you truly care about the people you are working with. Because end of the day, if somebody comes to you and they want to pay you a money so they can transform the body, whatever they want to do, achieve the goal, they're expecting some kind of a service from you, and vice versa. If like let's put it this way: if you've got a guy who's like heavily obese and he's coming to you and he says, "Listen, Scott, I've come to this point that I am absolutely, disgusted with myself," and you're looking at this guy and you're thinking, bloody hell, mate, if you're not going to lose that weight, you might end up, diabetic and things like that. So it's not like you just want to take that money off that guy, write him a program, and off you go, mate. That's what you truly want to see that person change. And I think that's probably what differs a good coaches maybe from bad coaches. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's that personal investment. And that's why working with people in person is, it's really important, because like you said, you are building a relationship with them, and you're with a very small amount of their daily and weekly and monthly and yearly time do they spend with you. But the most I train is, I've got some clients that'll come train with me 4 or 5 times a week. Some of them just come once or twice a week. Some of them do additional workouts at their home, or they do some additional workouts at like a different gym that they might have a membership at, or they travel. So I'm not really spending a significant amount of time with people, maybe upwards from 30 minutes to 2 to 2.5 hours per week, depending on the person. So that's not a lot of time. It really, being able to see them in person and talk to them in person, build that relationship where we can like text each other or email each other if they've got questions about nutrition, if they got questions about the workouts that they should be doing when they're on the road, because it's really what you do in the rest of your life, outside of the gym, that dictates are you going to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve, whether it's building muscle, whether it's losing fat, whether it's improving performance for, sport or some recreational hobby you have. There's many other things that factor in other than just that 1 to 2 hours that you're hitting the weights with me. So there's so many other things that they have to be accountable for. And you as their trainer or coach, you've got to make them aware of that, and you got to help them overcome those challenges and those obstacles in their life. I mean, it really, there's a lot more to it than just spitting out a program with some numbers and saying, here, do this. And even that, if you've lifted and worked out and stuff on your own for a while, that not every day in the gym is going to be a good day. There's days where you're feeling really good, you got good sleep, your nutrition's on target, and you feel like you can lift, anything. And then there's some days your sleeping's been shit, you're dehydrated,
Absolutely,
you haven't eaten well. It's like, so how do we make that adjustment? Because if I've got you, if you're feeling like shit because you haven't slept for 3 days and your nutrition's been off, and you're coming to the gym to train with me and we're supposed to do a heavy deadlift, how much are you going to get out of that workout?
It's not going to happen.
I say, Peter, man, you look like shit. Let's go do some yoga, man. Let's stretch a little bit. Let's do a few kettlebell swings. Let's drag the sled and maybe stimulate some recovery. Go drink a gallon of water, get some food, get some good night's sleep, and then come back in tomorrow. And then we'll hit that heavy deadlift. So you have to be able to help them auto-regulate the program based on their daily preparedness. Programming cannot just be static. So coaching, really, there is an art to working with people, and you only learn that through years and years and years and thousands and tens of thousands of hours of working with different people, different personality types. And it takes a long time to really build, a level of competency in that.
I mean, that's what I personally believe in. I mean, training, I believe in like a holistic approach to training and things like that. It's not just an isolated thing. I believe truly that when it comes to training, you need to have a look at the different aspects. I mean, just to give you a bit of a story that I remember, like, because I used to like I was always like back in, we're talking like 2000, early 2000. I was really a skinny guy. And I remember back in 2005 when I came over to live in the UK, and I was still a skinny guy, and I decided that I'm gonna bulk up, so I'm gonna start training and I'm gonna eat calories and things like that. So, and I think, and I did it the really wrong way, because my go-to foods were like kebabs. We're talking about shitty food. And I remember, and by that time, I think I had some kind of a job that it was pretty much sitting, I was pretty much, I was sitting all the time. And I think, I can't remember exactly how many months, but I gained, I think within a year, I gained, what did I gain? 20 kilograms, which is like 40 pounds or something like that. Yeah. And I remember one day I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought like, and I remember I still got this image in my mind that I am actually walking upstairs to the bathroom, and all of a sudden my heart is starting beating, and I'm thinking that can't be good, and I just all of a sudden like it hit me like that I need to start doing something about it, and always like I credit my wife for it because she's a qualified PE teacher. And she was like the very first person who kind of taught me what do I need to do. And I remember and I was like thinking, I don't want to lose the weight and then, put it back on. I need to have a look on this, like as a bigger picture, what I'm doing, what's my lifestyle and things like that. And that's actually when I started like gravitating towards cutting the meat out and things like that. And it's been, for me, it's been now, I think, over a decade. And I've maintained what I achieved by that time because I look at the picture like in a holistic way. And I think that's what the problem is. And I don't really like the word diet, because, to me, diet or like, things like, New Year's resolution is the best example, for example, that right then, yeah, you know what it's like, yeah, New Year's resolution, by January, I'm going to start smoking. By January, I'm going to start hitting the gym. And I remember times when I was like going to, when I was going to the gym we're talking about January, and it was absolutely packed. You're walking in there and, you're walking in there, and everything is pretty much like all the like dumbbells, everything, all the benches are taken. You've got group of people, especially like group of young lads talking between each other, on the phones and stuff like that. And you're thinking, bloody hell, I came in to do my workout and I need to like wait in the queue to jump on the bench. And you know what it's like. January, February, March, April comes. There is no one there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is.
But it was like you said, you talk about diet and you talk about this and that, but it's not, nobody talks about lifestyle. And like when you said you look at things holistically, you really need to do that. And, one of the problems with the and it's not even really the fitness industry, but it's like maybe the strength sport, world or whatever. Things have gotten so specialized over the years, where people are going to the extremes in powerlifting, they're going to the extremes in bodybuilding, they're going to the extremes in strongman or Olympic weightlifting, which is cool because they're out there pushing the limits of what the human body can do, but it's also not healthy, So I think like, for me, I had a similar experience where I was competing in powerlifting and I was doing everything I could to get big. I was eating, a very meat heavy diet. I've done everything from keto to even before it was carnivore, just eating a lot of meat, eating a lot of calorie dense, high calorie foods, just trying to get as big as possible. And I got my body weight up to about 235 and I would cut down to 220 for my powerlifting competitions. And I was getting a lot stronger. But, like you said, when you walked up those stairs and you could feel your heart, I was kind of the same way, and I remember going to the doctor and getting some blood work done and my cholesterol was bad and my triglycerides were bad. And, I'm like, oh, I'll lose some weight. I'll do keto. It didn't help. My lab still stayed bad and all this stuff. And I thought, man, here I am. I'm like 33 years old. And my doctor's like, are you a fitness trainer? You help people get healthy and in shape. She's like,
you don't look fit yourself.
Yeah. And I thought, man, I'm fooling myself, man. I'm not going to do what it takes to go to the next level in powerlifting, because I at my height, I'm 5'10". I really needed to be like 275 pounds to be competitive, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get, on anabolics. I'm not going to keep eating shitty food just to get really big. I'm just not going to do it. Hey, if somebody wants to do that, I'm not being judgmental, man. It's your choice. You can totally live your life how you want to live. And I mean, I think powerlifters at the highest level, who are sacrificing, maybe some years or maybe some of their health, but they're doing it to break world records. Hey, right on, man. That's awesome. That's your decision. I'm all for that, but I think the majority of people want to have a significant health span where they have really good quality of life for a lot of years, and they can do the things that they want to do into their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and possibly beyond. And in order to do that, you do have to look at things holistically, and you have to look at things the way the founding fathers of the physical culture movement back in the 1800s and the early 1900s. I think of people like George Hackenschmidt and Arthur Saxon and all these people who were strong. They had good physiques. They focused on their nutrition. It was a holistic approach to fitness, to strength, to health. I mean, it was everything. Like I think about George Hackenschmidt's book that I read, The Way to Live in Health and Physical Fitness, I think. And it was, on one page, he said, health can never be divorced from strength. And I thought, or strength can never be divorced from health, but you get the idea. And I thought, wow, that's brilliant, because, it doesn't mean that we just need to be like, yogis, drinking green juices, meditating on a mountaintop. Again, that's fine if you want to do that.
Absolutely.
We don't need to be, carnivore powerlifters just trying to lift the most weight, but we can lift weights and get stronger. We can eat healthy. We can, develop strong aerobic, cardiovascular systems. We can be flexible. We can have mobility. We should try to do all this if our goal is longevity, health span. If we want to do things like train martial arts, or we want to be, hiking or climbing or active or whatever we want to do into the later stages of life, you have to take the holistic approach that you mentioned earlier and apply that to not just training, but everything. And it's training, it's sleep, it's nutrition. I mean, it's everything. You see how that stuff's all interwoven together. And there's points where I've got to push this a little bit more, or I've got to put this a little bit, you know what I'm saying? I mean, but you have to do it from that holistic standpoint if you want to have good quality of life. And like I said, good health span, not just a long lifespan.
But the thing is that people that are absolutely, when they want to achieve the master level, obviously they need to push it, but they can't, they can't sustain that. I remember,
it's a small window.
It is, yeah. I mean, even like you're looking at, a strongman competitors like Eddie Hall, the guy who broke 500K deadlift. Yeah. And, obviously there is a documentary about, Eddie the Beast. So obviously he looked like when you're looking at, there's I remember back when I was a young lad and strongman.
Hey, do you remember in the Eddie documentary, where he was sitting there eating and he said, I wake up at 4:30 a.m. before going to the gym. Not for my first meal. He said, for my first force feeding. He literally referred to his meals as force feedings.
He did.
Not meals, because he had to force the calories down his throat. That I'm like, man, he's eating a lot of junk food and whatever the hell he wants to eat. That doesn't look enjoyable, man. It looks like he is stuffing himself, and it looks like he's about to burst.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I remember the scene when he was walking out from the supermarket with his trolley, pushing his trolley, and his trolley was like, overfilled with like stuff like he had so much food, and, the amount of money he was saying. But, you're looking at him now, he looks different. He's lost a lot of weight. There was, I remember like back years ago, you're talking about 20 years ago, there was a strongman competitor. He's probably one of the greatest Lithuanian guys, Zydrunas Savickas.
Yeah, and Big Z.
He always, I remember, because he was always competing with our own Mariusz Pudzianowski in the strongman competition. But Savickas, he was a beast. But you were looking, his belly was like that, and he was a huge guy. But I remember I came across his like pictures a few years ago, and mate, he looks totally different because you cannot sustain. You can. The thing is, you cannot sustain. And going back to the point where you were saying that people have started taking this to the extreme levels, and let's throw it back in a history. I remember like even one of the famous probably bodybuilders of the golden era, Steve Reeves. He was like a pure example of taking it the right, because I remember like because even at his programs and things like that, and I remember reading about it, he was always saying like, I only have 3 meals per day. And to me, it's not about like I can get bigger, things like that. But I think he actually mentioned that for him, it was more holistically approach as well. Yeah. Steve Reeves did, So
and he was on the tail end. He was on the tail end of the original physical culture movement, and it was right about that time where it was like the Mr. Universe, when that was the big bodybuilding competition. That was about the time where things started to fracture. Then the Mr. Olympia started, and then it got more and more extreme, and then the strength sports, branched off and all that. But those guys back then, like the the golden era of bodybuilding, you know, like Steve Reeves. And I think about Reg Park. I think about like Bill Pearl, who just passed away recently, but Bill Pearl just had that classic physique. You know, those guys back then, they had amazing physiques, but they also looked like they could go do something athletic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
they had
absolutely,
they
yeah.
had a significant amount of muscle, but they looked like they could go, like if they wanted to play some football, or if they wanted to go climb, or if they wanted to go, go swim, or just anything. They had like there was an athletic look and appeal about them. Whereas now you look at the guys, they're just these big gargantuan mass monsters.
Yeah,
You know, you can hear them breathing heavy when they're just sitting there doing an interview
yeah,
in their
yeah.
off season. You know,
You
because
remember?
they're pushing 300 pounds off season. It's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You remember there was I can't remember what was it called. It was this film with Arnie, and what was it? The runner, when he was like put in some kind of a competition when he was like
Yeah,
a TV
pumping iron.
No. I'm talking when Arnie was. I'm not talking about the pumping iron. I'm talking when he was like an actor. I remember this film was like, it was like in a future. This film was set in future when Arnie was put in, like he had to compare. He had to compete with other guys in some kind of like a TV play and things.
Oh,
It was it was
like
like,
Total
I think it
Recall or
was.
something?
No, I think I can't remember the title. But anyway, the way I'm saying this, it was a
Blade Run? No,
scene when
not Blade. Was
no.
it Blade? No, not.
No, that's the yeah, but it was like a shitty 80s film, but it was like
Yeah, I
showing like
remember the movie.
you remember. I can't remember the title, but anyway, there was a scene when Arnie, like when he was like, when the producers or whatever who was creating this TV show, they picked him up, the way he was running, because he had this massive physique, but he was
Yeah,
running in like in a gracious way, so he still had that stamina when
yeah,
when he was like, he was still fit and things like that. But I mean, you're looking at it now, like you've got this like documentaries or films on Netflix, like Generation Iron and things like that, and you've got people
yeah,
in there that they look like, they don't look. It's not natural. I mean, I remember,
yeah,
probably, you remember there was a documentary about, Ronnie Coleman and how much problem did he have and things like that. And I mean,
yeah.
even let's obviously let's throw it at, one of your greatest hero, West Side Barbo. And I mean, those guys, they were pushing to the limits, and like I said, because they wanted to achieve about that. But
Yeah.
I mean, even like, Louis was telling in that documentary that obviously he had pretty much every joint's gone in his body and things like that.
Hey,
So
I got a funny story about that. So one time I was going to train at Westside, and he always used to invite me to breakfast, and I had been up there a couple of times already, and I took some of my lifters up with me this time, and there's this restaurant called Bob Evans in Ohio, and that's where he takes his team, or he would take his team every morning before they would train, and so I remember walking in, and he was sitting at the table, and he starts to get up. He's like, "Hey, Scott," and he's pushing himself up out of his chair, and it seemed like it took him like 10 minutes to stand up, and he goes, "Watch this," and he
right.
picks up his left leg, and he starts kicking his leg at the knee joint, and his leg is just moving like crazy. And I said, "Well, that knee looks really good, Lou." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I got some stem cell injections about 3 weeks ago." He said, "My knee feels unbelievable." I said, "Well, what's wrong with the rest of your body? You can't turn your neck. You can't." He said, "Well, yeah." He goes, I had to get off all the anti-inflammatories for my knee to heal." He said, "So I've been on anti-inflammatories since 91. This was like 2016 or 2017. Yeah, I think it was like 2016. And he goes, "I've been on anti-inflammatories since 91. I'm like, "Oh God, what has that done to his liver?" But he's like, "So the rest of my body's stiff." He goes, "But my knee," he goes, "I can actually move it." And I started thinking, I'm like, "You can't move any other
Crikey.
joint on your body, Lou." And
Yeah.
I will say, the one thing about Lou that I always respected was the guy had no regrets about how far
Mm.
he pushed himself
Yeah,
and what
absolutely.
he
Yeah.
did. And that, going back to what I said, when we were talking a little while ago, um, you can make your own choices. And that's the one thing I respect about him. And I respect, he wanted to push things to the absolute limit and build the strongest gym that the world's ever seen. And he did that. And his
He did,
legacy,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
he's going to be immortal because of it. And same with Ronnie Coleman, man. When you watch that documentary and you see everything he went through, and they ask, "Do you regret anything?" He goes, "I should have went for another rep with that 800-pound deadlift." or that 800-pound squat. And I'm like, that's pretty badass, you know, because he's saying that, you know, after having multiple back surgeries, after requiring, you know, the assistance of crutches to walk or a walker to walk, you know, that's a guy who was all in for what he did. And he was one of the greatest Mr. Olympias ever. And I respect that, you know, I respect that. It's not for anybody to tell them how to live their lives. You know, like Louis always used to say, he said, you know, when it's time for me to die, I'm the one that's got to die. So I'm alive. Let me lead the life I want to live. So I always respected those guys, and you know, the ones that push themselves to the limits. If they didn't have any regrets, man, then right on. You know, you lived your life on your terms, the way you wanted to live it. So I always had a lot of respect for them for doing that, because he never, you know, Lou always said, you know, I never strayed from the way, and he didn't. You know,
I absolutely agree. I mean, because if I mean, but those people, they're, you know, they're just a small percentage into it, and
very
we wouldn't
small,
have problem, and you know, we wouldn't have all those people like Louis Simmons, Ronnie Coleman, you know, Dorian Yates. We wouldn't have all the Olympic champions if they weren't pushing to, you know, push it to the limit. And so, but credit to them. But I mean, we are talking about majority of the people, and sometimes like people fall into that trap when they're looking into like those people, and then try to, you know, reach the same level, and they simply cannot do it, because you know, they falling down that trap that, oh, I want to look like Ronnie Coleman and things like that. But you just, you know, it's not going to happen unless, like I say, you are, you know, you know, you're going to go in for it. And I think that's what it is, simple as that. If you are just an ordinary person, like you say, you know, an ordinary Joe, I think you have to focus, obviously, that the way what you do, the training what you do will preserve your longevity, the diet what you have, and things like that. So, and you know, so let's talk about of diet.
Well,
and
it becomes you have to define your goals for yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to be honest with the things that you want to do. And if you want to do something extreme, you have to understand, you know, what it's going to cost you from a health standpoint, from, you know, an injury potential standpoint. And, you know, you've also got to set, what is the line that you're not willing to cross? You know, I heard Dave Tate, who was a lifter at Westside, and JM Blakely, who was one of the greatest bench pressers ever, talking on Dave Tate's podcast one time. And JM said, you know, that he was always suspicious when people say they would do anything to achieve their goals. And he's like, you wouldn't do anything. There's something that you won't do. You know, you have to figure out what line you're not willing to cross, whether it's about your health, whether it's about lifestyle, you know, whatever. So you've got to be honest and set those parameters, and then have at it, you know. But, you know, if that's not in the cards for you, it all comes down to being honest with the goals that you want to achieve. And if you're honest with what you want to do from a physical standpoint, then you can dictate the training, you can dictate the nutrition, you can dictate everything else to steer you toward those goals. But you just have to understand that if you're going to do something, the further down the extreme athletic spectrum you get, the further you get away from health, you know, and you've got to understand that, you know. And I think for most people, you know, they want to be closer on that spectrum than they want to be further to one end, you know.
Yeah, I think it takes, you know, absolutely. And I'm looking at this like, have you ever watched that documentary on Netflix, Icarus, about doping scandal and the guy?
Oh, that was great. Yeah, that was
it's
awesome.
To me, it's like when I after I've watched that, I'm totally looking at the Olympics in a totally different way. To me, it's just. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've got respect for those people, you know, because the amount of training they have to go through. But it's just it's like totally it tarnishes everything what you believe about sport, because you know all these influence and things like that. And you think about young people that, you know, they get to the training and they've got ambition and things like that, and they want to achieve something, so they look into the goals, and then also then, you know, you get into that point where you need to take, you know, you need to decide whether you're taking the, we've already mentioned, the extreme step, or, you know, or you being happy with being mediocre and things like that. So I think that's what it is. So